This is Red Ice Radio. From the visible to the obscure. RedIceCreations.com.
Welcome back to Red Ice Radio, friends, listeners, and seekers of the truth. My name is Henrik. RedIceCreations.com is our website. Follow us on a regular basis. We cover a vast number of subjects that are essential in these interesting times. Today we are going to continue our conversation on the invention of AIDS with Peter Duesberg, one of the leading voices in the movement opposing the HIV/AIDS hypothesis. Is Dr. Peter Duesberg, a renowned virologist with a PhD in chemistry, currently working at the University of California in Berkeley. He and other scientists have put their reputations on the line in order to pose some of the fundamental questions, while not questioning the existence of AIDS, but rather the means through which it is acquired. He says that there still is no hard proof that HIV is responsible for AIDS. In the process of posing these simple questions, he has been ousted by the rest of the scientific collective and drawn into a lot of controversy because of his work. Peter's website is Duesberg.com, and he is the author of Inventing the AIDS Virus. And also, before we go to Peter, in case you didn't hear our previous program with David Crow on Rethinking AIDS, I want to mention again that the 2011 Rethinking AIDS conference in Washington, D.C. on December 1st to the 3rd, that we do mention in this program as well, unfortunately have been postponed. I suggest that you check their website, rethinkingaids.com, for the latest updates on the conference. But let's go to our guest now. Okay, welcome to Red Ice Radio, Peter Duesberg. It is great to have you with us here on the program. First of all, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us today, Peter.
Thanks, Henrik. It's a pleasure to talk about a subject that has cost me much more time than we're going to spend together here today.
I know. We're going to get into it, Peter. We want to make sure to give you proper time here today to be able to present your work and your research, of course. At the outset, can you tell us a little bit about what you've been researching at Berkeley in regards to retroviruses, AIDS, and HIV? And also, if you can, tell us how you've been treated consequently by the mainstream scientific community, Peter.
Well, I came to Berkeley from Germany as a young postdoc in '64 to study retroviruses, the same group of viruses to which HIV belongs. They were at that time considered to be the most likely, a very likely cause of cancer, the so-called RNA tumor viruses. You may have heard about Rous sarcoma virus, got a Nobel Prize for it, and Bishop Nuamus got a Nobel Prize for it. There are a lot of prizes for viruses and cancer, although cancer is not contagious, by the way. But nevertheless, virologists always do well in this. So I was going to be on the bandwagon too, and I was quite successful at the beginning. It was me who worked out the genetic structure, as we call it, or the genetic map of these viruses, which was much more difficult in the 60s and 70s than it is now with cloning. And we found out that what the genetic structure is, and it's true for HIV as well as for all other retroviruses that are thought to cause cancer or tumors, at least. And as a result of that work, we found also a so-called oncogene, a gene in the Rous sarcoma virus and also in many other tumor viruses, in several other tumors, not in very many, but in a few, that seem to cause something like a cancer or at least a hyperplasia. And that was immensely popular, more popular than I ever knew it was when I found it, because of the cancer theory that cancer is caused by mutation of genes. And here was at last a gene found in a virus that could cause cancer. So here was proof of principle that genes would cause cancer. And I was advanced very fast. I had a fast career. I was, within a couple of years, I was full professor. I was California Scientist of the Year. I think I was even nominated by your favorite award, everybody's favorite award.
I don't know why that has happened, Peter. I mean, they've discredited themselves so many times now, considering who they've been given this to. But anyway, that's another story.
Yep. And anyway, so I was considered. It was in Nature there that antecedents to a Nobel Prize and so on. But and all of this suddenly changed when I questioned HIV as the cause of AIDS. In 1987, And I also questioned, in fact, with it, the whole idea that viruses, particularly retroviruses, are a significant or a major cause of cancer, or even a direct cause of cancer. If anything, they're more like an indirect cause. They can sometimes cause overgrowth and so on, but that's only in conditions where you don't have an immune system, immune deficiency, like in newborn embryos, animal embryos, of course, we worked with, or in immune deficient animals like AIDS patients, there it would work. But in wild animals, you never see a cancer that is contagious, and in humans likewise. So I called this whole idea somewhat in question, and with it, my popularity and status declined, my notoriety increased, and I became, now I end up even on your list of controversial scientists, which is the ultimate confirmation that I'm no longer mainstream.
Well, that's a good thing. It means that you're on the track, you know.
Yeah.
So, and tell us a little bit about how you come to this conclusion. Why did you all of a sudden then begin to go the opposite way that the rest of the scientific community was going in?
Actually, I'm a stick in the mud. I'm much more orthodox than they give me credit for, and much more orthodox than they are, or than they say they are now. One of the consensus reasons why we thought retroviruses would cause cancer is because, contrary to most other viruses, they do not kill infected cells. They're not cytocidal, as we say in the business. So flu and herpes and yellow fever and measles and mumps and pox and vaccinia, all of these viruses kill the cells while they're infecting them. You know? But the retroviruses were so, and I'm using the word deliberately now, so harmless that the cell wouldn't even mind being infected by them. They coexist with the cell, and they're in fact ubiquitous in most animals, certainly vertebrates, in mice and rats and in dogs and in cats and in fish and in monkeys and in humans. And they never have caused a disease in them. And that was my first objection to the idea advanced in 1984 by Gallo, and actually in a more tentative way by Montagnier a year earlier, that HIV was causing AIDS by killing T cells. I said, wait a minute, didn't we always assure each other or reassure anybody else these viruses don't kill cells, so therefore they could possibly cause cancer? But since the cancer idea didn't hold track as well, people were looking for other clinical relevance for these viruses, in which they had invested so much time and so much money. And AIDS was on the horizon, a new epidemic coming up. Say, okay, maybe that's what it does. So let's try that. But here, the first violation of anything I knew and anything that was known at the time to me, and I knew I was teaching it, so I was quite well informed at the time. The retroviruses don't kill cells. And that was very much like it, like you say hello in the morning. That was kept being reassured and repeated and confirmed over and over. And now we kill one. And I said, so how can that be? Well, to this very day, we don't have the answer. And then came with it very soon after the second problem. Neither Dr. Gallo, my old friend Dr. Gallo from the NIH, nor Robin Weiss in the United Kingdom, and many others could actually find the virus that Montagnier had claimed he had found. Even in dying AIDS patients, in hundreds of patients, there was no virus to be found. They finally isolated it in a very indirect way. They take the blood out and call it in cell culture and give it some drugs and finally get the virus out. And then they made antibodies against this antigens from that virus and checked patients with AIDS for antibodies against the virus. That became the standard for the infection by HIV. We call it, you are HIV positive. You may have heard that word.
Yeah.
It means you have antibodies against the virus. Now here is a big contradiction with anything that science in the last 200 years of immunology and virology has learned. the only protection against the virus, you probably know from your doctors and from your childhood, even from your adulthood, that is vaccination is the protection against viral diseases. You get it, and the vaccination is an artificial or natural induction of immunity. So you get infected with a poliovirus with a special strain that is not so pathogenic, and you make antibodies, and then you're vaccinated, and you're protected. The same with pox, the same with flu, the same with measles, all other viruses. Antibodies or immunity is said to prevent disease, protect you against disease. And here with HIV, they said it's the other way around. When you have antibody against the virus, and only then, not before, you are now at risk of getting AIDS. So I think you can take the most orthodox doctors, even in the Karolinska in Sweden, who gave the Nobel Prize to HIV.
Yeah.
When you ask them about any other virus, what can I do about it? And they will say, well, get vaccinated, or get a vaccine from somewhere else, or get an attenuated strain, and then you are protected. When you ask them about HIV, and you say, I have antibodies against it, they'll say, oh my God, you'll get AIDS. Huh. And the only good news then is they say, oh, well, you cannot get it right away, but you have a little time. There is a magic latent period. And magic, I choose that word deliberately because it is very magic. It's not scientific. You get infected today, you make antibodies within weeks, and all other pathogenic viruses use that short period before immunity to attack. That's when they replicate. That's when the defense from the body is not there, and they can do what they want. But as soon as you have your normal immune defense, then the virus is neutralized. But with HIV, they say, well, only after it's neutralized, and only another 5 or 10 years later, now you get diarrhea, or you get dementia, or you get pneumonia, or you get immune deficiency, or you get Kaposi sarcoma, or you get pneumocystis pneumonia, tons of diseases, all following infection and, most importantly, neutralization by antibody, in other words, immunity, with a latent period of another 5 or 10 years. There's no logic, nothing.
No, I don't understand this at all. You know,
and believe me, you're not the only one, and I'm not the only one. Even Anthony Fauci, the director of the National Institute of Allergy Infectious Diseases, NIAID, from watching, he wrote recently, or some of his office wrote recently, it's still a puzzle how that works and why it takes so long. But you're in trouble if you say, therefore, it's not the virus, there must be something else. Then you are immediately excluded from any further discussions, and don't get any more funds, and don't get any more students, and the fun is over.
Yeah, we want to get to why, obviously, and we want to tie in the pharmaceutical industry in all of this as well, Peter. But basically what you're saying is that there is a virus, though. I mean, what's strange to me, Peter, is that it took them, about 10 years to actually, produce these images, if you will, that we see today with the HIV virus, this kind of spiky molecule-ish type of thing. But when hearing how that is produced, it's very strange to me to hear that very dubious way that they do that. Is that scientific, to take the blood, not the blood plasma of somebody, but you take out the red and the white blood cells, you take what's over, and then you kind of you make it into a chemical cocktail in there too. How does that work, Peter?
That is not uncommon. It has been used to essentially rescue or activate. Those are words for this, what I'm describing now, to activate what's called latent viruses out of body cells. Yeah, for example, you must know herpes. I bet you know most people are infected by herpes at some point in their life. You get these lesions, genital lesions or facial, oral lesions, and then the immune system knocks them out. But every once in a while they come back. It's called herpes reactivation. So they're sitting latently in your body. Most of them are knocked out by the immune system, but some are not. They're latent and waiting for a good time to come back. And then they come back, or you can coax them out of the latent state by taking them out of the body and putting them in cell culture. The key here is away from the immune system. The immune system keeps them down. As soon as they raise their head again, the immune system knocks them out. But if your immune system declines as a result of a disease or surgery or age, then they come back. Or else you can artificially do this in vitro, and scientists have done that with cytomegalovirus, with many retroviruses, including, of course, HIV, and with herpes viruses, to study why they are suppressed and how they are suppressed and in what form and where they are in the cell, and in fact to prove the principle that they can become latent and come back out again. So for that you need tons of cells, because there are only in very few cells in this latent form, and they're very difficult to wake up, so to speak, to get out of this.
Right.
So that is the method of choice there, or that is used for this, is you take lots of blood from a patient, like lots, I mean it's 10, 20 milliliters, get millions of blood cells out, put them in cell culture, and wait until one of these cells begins to produce virus. And then they say, see, it was in there latently. So that is a standard method, but it's good for scientific research, for scientific discovery. Scientists often look for needles in a haystack, but it is a totally inappropriate method to identify a microbe that is causing a fatal disease.
Why?
You see what I'm saying? Well, when it's pathogenic, it's a bit like one-to-one. You are billions of cells. In order to knock out billions of cells of yours, so you begin to weaken or die, you need billions of microbes or viruses to kill them.
That's right, yeah.
But not one in a million that is sleeping there. It's like saying, okay, I get a nice rifle and knock out the Chinese army, of 1 million soldiers, or 2 million, probably. It's a good idea, but it's hard to do. You got to have at least 500,000 too in order to make a dent in this thing. And this is the same with microbes. If you have in 1 out of 1,000 cells a latent virus, you're not going to get sick from it. You can't. It may, even if it knocks out 1 out of 1,000 or even 1 out of 100 of your T cells, that's like cutting yourself shaving. You lose a few blood drops, equivalent of cells from a blood drop, and we are all built redundantly for reasons like that. You will never notice such a loss.
Yeah, I see.
You won't get sick from it.
That's
you
right.
only get sick from something that knocks out half or more of what you need, of what you could possibly replace in a short time or spare any time. That you can survive. But if it's over that, like with an acute infection, let's say if your lung is infected by a pneumonia virus or by a flu virus, chewing up half of your lung cells, then you start huffing and coughing and have fever and can even die from it if you're unlucky.
Yeah.
But never from a latent virus. And that's why I'm saying these retroviruses are almost always latent. Even if they are not latent, they don't even kill cells. So they have never shown up as pathogens, I mean as viral pathogens, agents that cause a disease in animals and in humans until the 60s, 70s, where they still haven't shown up as disease, but nobody looked for them or could detect them because they were not giving themselves away by causing a disease. That's how most microbes were discovered. Just tuberculosis and cholera was discovered because people developed these diseases and you see they were contagious. And then you say, okay, let's look what's contagious here, what is transmitted.
Yeah.
And that's how these viruses were discovered. That has never happened in the history of retrovirology, as far as I know.
So this is a new thing we're looking at here, and obviously, as your book implies, Peter, this is an invention, inventing the AIDS virus. But can we shift over then, because obviously in terms of terminology, AIDS is always bundled together with HIV, and they seem to kind of be interchangeable at this point. Maybe we can just break up the terms a little bit for those who are not aware of that yet.
Sure, you will do that. Yeah. Oh, okay. Good.
Basically, AIDS is the later version of you. First, they claim that you get HIV, right? The human immunodeficiency virus, and then later on, potentially, you're in the risk group of developing AIDS, which is acquired immune deficiency syndrome.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
can you tell us what some of these, what would basically cause this attack on the human immune system, and what are some of the symptoms you would see, Peter?
Well, see, the infection by the virus probably does nothing that we could detect. Look at the numbers and at the people who get it. It's something else. That is now an alternative theory. You want to go into this now, or you want to?
Sure. Let's go ahead.
Yeah. So anyway, look at people who are infected by HIV and have no other health risk, meaning they live normally as they did before and now get infected by HIV. Probably your most overwhelming example of this is Africa. You may have heard of Africa or read about Africa. They say a third of the population is infected by HIV.
Mm-hmm.
The World Health Organization, the CDC, and whatever, all these AIDS agencies advertise it and publish it repeatedly. You have read that, or you're aware of that?
Oh, of course, absolutely. We hear it all the time. It seems to have lessened, though, Peter, at least in my country and some of the other ones I've visited. It seems to not be as prominent anymore, and I think there's a reason for that. And we'll talk more about that later, but for sure I've heard about it. Go ahead.
That maybe. I'm introducing that as sort of an experiment of nature that would be is very telling what's happening after HIV, namely virtually nothing. The African continent, where the AIDS epidemic presumably started in the early 80s, shortly before it was discovered by Dr. Gallo and Montagnier, the virus that is, has started off there and has by now presumably infected a third of the population. Well, you would have expected that a third of the population would die within 5 or 10 years. These 5 or 10 years are over. But guess what happened? Are you aware what happened in Africa, population-wise?
They've almost doubled in population.
That is exactly right. They went from 400 million in the early 80s to 800 million in 2007. I think they're at 1 billion right now.
That's amazing, isn't it?
So it's very amazing. Well, it shows that this virus certainly helps the African population to explode. Yeah. I'm not even saying grow anymore. That's literally exploding. Mm. So they always say, I say bad things about HIV. He's helping a continent. Literally, I mean, it's damaging it, to be honest. I mean, it's way too fast, the population explosion, that they cannot sustain and maintain properly. That's what it is. So what I'm saying here is the bottom line is, if you continue your previous lifestyle, if you're not doing any other AIDS risk, which we're going to cover in a minute or later, then nothing happens with HIV infection, as 300 to 400 million Africans have taught us. They are not dying selectively. The AIDS infected fraction of 30% has stayed the same and has gone from a third of 400 million now to a third of 1 billion. That's 300 million. Mm. So that's pretty good. So that shows HIV by itself. In other words, normally living people, that doesn't do anything.
So it's the epidemic that never happened.
That is correct. The epidemic, the germ theory type epidemic that never happened. It was predicted to be a new pathogenic germ, sort of like the flu in 1918 or the syphilis or the plagues of the medieval days, and even modern cholera epidemics, these kind of things, or yellow fever epidemics that come in new into a country, spread exponentially within weeks, then kill a lot of people, others become immune, and then because of immunity, they disappear again. That's the standard pattern. That was predicted for HIV. They say, oh, it's sexually transmitted. The heterosexual, the mainstream population is at risk, and they will die in the US, a large proportion they will die in Europe, and they will die in Africa, and nothing like that has happened in the last 27 years anywhere. Mm. The mainstream, so the average, general, heterosexual population in the US, in Europe, in Asia, in South America, and as I know now, and as we just discussed, in Africa, has no AIDS epidemic. There's no AIDS epidemic. The only ones who get AIDS, according to these authorities, the Centers for Disease Control in the US, the World Health Organization in Geneva, are people like intravenous drug users. That's about half of them in Europe and in the US. And the other nearly half, there are a few small minorities too, are the male homosexuals. But it's not your all-American, all-European male homosexuals.
Mm-hmm.
It's a minority who, according to their own documentation and own information, have hundreds, often thousands of sexual partners. And to achieve that, you need a lot of drugs. Like in the Olympics, you break records nowadays in the bedrooms too, with chemicals. And those are like amphetamines and nitrite inhalants, also called poppers, or heroin, and or quaaludes, and God knows what they're all called, artificial drugs, which are taken wildly in these parties, particularly in some of the gay centers, like in San Francisco, New York, and Los Angeles.
So obviously, Peter, here's where it's get controversial and people get, obviously emotionally involved in this and invested instead. But what you're saying, obviously, is that this is because of lifestyle choices, basically, in that sense, right? This is because of behavior, right? So
you see, if it were a virus, it would be contagious. Take one of the best numbers. America prides itself of having the best science, the best doctors, the best healthcare, everything, right? And in this country, we have now 1 million recorded AIDS patients in 27 years since HIV was discovered to be the so-called cause of AIDS. And we have still no vaccine. You know that too, yeah?
Yeah, sure.
So 1 million healthcare workers have treated 1 million AIDS patients for 27 years. Guess how many you can find in the literature, not in sensational little journals. I mean, in the scientific literature, recorded as doctors, healthcare workers, or nurses who have contracted AIDS from their patients by needle sticks, by surgery, by whatever, taking care of everything. How many?
0.
Exactly. 0.
Yeah.
There's not one documented case of a contact infection to a doctor. The same in Africa, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
There are all these sex tourists going there, the scientists going there, the AIDS researchers going there. You never hear of them coming home with AIDS. They come home with nice pictures and juicy stories and show you that the Africans dying. Nothing ever happens to them. Nothing.
So, to me...
So this is not a contagious disease.
Right, yeah. Exactly. So again, let's go back to this idea then of what is
because
causing...
Because you say it's controversial to even think lifestyle. Lifestyle is lifestyle. Science is not only politically correct. A virus is, of course, politically correct because you can only blame God for it, and he doesn't mind so much. But yes, lifestyle, if you take drugs, if you take even antiviral drugs, you can blame us for it. I mean, us humans. But again, I mean, they charge me, I'm homophobe, I'm against homosexuals, against junkies. Why should I be against them? I'm against our establishment, scientific establishment, not informing them of the risk.
Exactly.
Not that they are so bad. I mean, if if somebody offers me a good cut of cocaine, I wouldn't say no either. You know what I mean? So even if but I mean, what needs to be said and done is, if you do this over and over and over again, there's a time when it's over with you. It's the same with smoking and same with alcohol.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's what I wanted to get to. That some of these symptoms are basically things that you can get when you're malnourished, when you're even eating wrong. We see an epidemic of cancer in society, right? And so why is that not addressed in the same way? Well, actually it is, because the cancer industry is right there as well with the AIDS industry. But basically lifestyle choices. Why is, and I want to try to get to this point of some of these symptoms that we can see then with AIDS, and why is it that happens with the human body? Is it because of malnutrition? Is it just because the drug use is so, as you say, it's being kept up so much that your body cannot basically cope with it? Is that what's happening here, Peter? Yeah,
that is, you're burning out. That's what they call these 10-year latent periods. Let's say you are 10, 18, or 20 and get hooked on recreational drugs like amphetamines and heroines and cocaine and what are they? Yeah. Or even in the gay circuit lifestyle, which is also heavily dependent on drugs, sex drugs, all of this. So you're not taking doses that kill you. You're taking doses that make you perform better or more than you would ever otherwise. Yeah. So this can be done for 5 or 10 years, but then you burn out. It was known before that junkies would burn out. The average lifespan of an intravenous drug users in US and Europe, with or without HIV, is almost the same. It's around in their 30s, middle 30s, they die. They die from infections.
And also you exhaust your adrenaline glands. So many more things. Your endocrine system, things are beginning to shut down after a while in your body because you can't take it, right?
Yeah, and then you fire up these brain cells, the neurons, artificially with chemicals all the time. Yeah. Well, someday, as they say here, they don't come back. You know.
Peter, is there a relationship in terms of the disease between AIDS then or AIDS/HIV and cancer? Or are they? Is there some similarity between them?
HIV and cancer, you mean now? Or
yeah.
What? No, well, they have included so many diseases in AIDS that some of them are even cancer. So that is a very artificial relationship by definition. They say when you're a woman, you have cervical cancer and have HIV, then they say HIV is causing that too now. Huh. Or they say if you're a man, typically men, gay men get Kaposi sarcoma, and that's very likely from these nitrite inhalants, then you get Kaposi sarcoma from HIV. But as I said, 300 million Africans speak otherwise.
Yeah,
they don't have more cervical cancer or more Kaposi sarcoma than they had before. There is a low incidence of these diseases. Well, cervical cancer isn't even that low, but it's still one of the bigger cancers, but it's certainly not in young age, and it's certainly not dependent on HIV.
How is it then? Can we talk about the America and the African correlation there, if you will, because obviously the lifestyles are going to be very different on these different continents, right? So, why is this happening in Africa? I mean, as we mentioned, it hasn't burst out into the epidemic that we once thought it would be, but it's still there, right? So, what's going on? Why?
Well, what's going on there is actually very minimal. It's so little you cannot measure it because of the tremendous increase. It's very difficult to find mortality against an explosive cause of a population. If the population is steady, then you can see, okay, now all of a sudden we have fewer people around. Then there's something happening, like in a war or like in a real fatal plague epidemic. Then all of a sudden a third of the people are gone. But here they're growing all the time. So it's very difficult even to demonstrate statistically losses compared to an increase that is so unprecedentedly high. So that's even uncertain. But, I mean, what people die from in Africa has apparently been the leading causes of death for a long time before. It's tuberculosis, diarrhea, and fevers, which are all consequences of malnutrition.
Right.
And poverty. You don't get the right food and you don't get enough of it.
No clean water, things like that.
No clean water, that's what it is, yeah. That is the main causes of mortality in Africa with and without AIDS, even now, because of the same problems. They haven't been solved.
So with the aid of Montague, Robert Gallo, they pulled, we got hoodwinked. They invented, if you will, then a new disease.
That's what I mean. I mean, they invented the virus for the disease. Whatever was their disease is still the same. But what they predicted never came. They predicted in line with the so-called germ theory of disease, like tuberculosis started with Pasteur and Koch, that microbes can cause disease. The typical pattern is when a new microbe comes in, they said HIV was the new microbe here, it spreads exponentially in the population, particularly if it's, as I said, sexually transmitted. It should be long in the heterosexual population, and there were 1 million infected in the US in 85. So what is it waiting for? Where is the 1 million people epidemic in the US, or the 300 million epidemic in Africa, or how many million in Thailand or in Rio de Janeiro or wherever? Nowhere, anywhere. Not in Russia, not in Germany, not in Sweden, not in anywhere do we have a heterosexual AIDS epidemic. Nowhere. And there are millions of carriers all over the world. Of course, the most of them supposedly in Africa, if that's true. But at least that's what they say. So they wanted HIV to be another pathogenic virus like the herpes and the flus and these kind of guys and the polios, and it turned out to be wrong. But they don't want to retract it because they never had it so good. They get, at least in the US alone, 10 billion for research and treatment on HIV, and nothing happens.
That's a good point. Let's talk about that. The incentive for this, the reason why this would get going. A lot of money, a lot of careers, a lot of research. Everything is relying that this is the actuality, right? So, as I mentioned to David Crow in our previous guest on this topic, the one who's organizing the conference, and I want to ask you a little bit more about that later here, upcoming in December in Washington, D.C. But what we've seen, Peter, in recent years is launching of new types of epidemics that on the same level haven't panned out. We heard about SARS. Oh my God, watch out. Here comes the bird flu and the swine flu and all of these other things are popping up. And people need to get vaccinated and they need to do it now. It's going to take over. But they, on the same level as being kind of, if you will, invented diseases, they haven't either panned out in the way that they thought it would.
None of them have, no. And the SARS was a fluke and the pig's flu was a fluke. Then they had another mad cow disease.
Yep.
They all need this to justify their existence, like the people at the Centers for Disease Control and also the scientists. They make a career with it. They cannot say in mid-career, I'm sorry, that wasn't the right virus. They wouldn't be promoted anymore. They would be in the same position that I am now. They won't get a research grant. They won't get any students. They won't get merit increases. And if they publish it, they would have a hell of a time getting it published anywhere.
Yeah. So Robert Gallo did...
they wouldn't get a Nobel Prize either, see?
well, exactly. The pharmaceutical industry did they simply pick up on something that Gallo then kind of initiated, or is it the other way around? Do you think was Robert Gallo in cahoots and working to develop these drugs that I want to talk about, ACT to begin with?
Mm-hmm. Well, Gallo is an ambitious scientist like me and like many of them. He wanted to get his Nobel Prize, like me too, everybody, many of them. And he thought here was a politically opening, essentially. AIDS was coming along. People were looking for causes. And for everybody, a vaccine is the best candidate. The AIDS patients on the sort of so-called leftist newspaper in America, like New York Times, didn't want to blame the victims, as the slogan is. Yeah.
Right, right.
Liz Taylor said, don't say anything bad about my friend Rock Hudson and all these guys. Yeah. These are all good guys. And they are, well, I think they are. I mean, I'm not saying they're bad guys. But if you say, okay, they take too many poppers and have too many days and getting sick from it, that's not so good in America. No, you're supposed to be, you don't take any drugs in America. Maybe a little alcohol sometimes after hours, but not drugs.
Right.
That's done by foreigners, but not really Americans. So that was politically incorrect. And the virus was very popular. Okay, poor Rock Hudson got infected by an unlucky date. The homosexuals don't have to look for their lifestyle, which at least the minority we're talking about it that is at risk for AIDS is definitely at high risk for with the drugs they take. And it's not, as I say, it's a small minority. And it was great also for the pharma companies. You cannot treat drug addiction with chemicals, at least not yet. Probably they will someday do too. But with viruses, you can start throwing in anything, see how it works. You know? That's what they have done abundantly. And because of the ideology, I'm saying, that was prepared by the scientists that this is a new virus, the drug companies could go all the way. They say, okay, viruses are hard to knock out. We have to use the hardest drug available, namely like in cancer chemotherapy, the ones that terminate DNA synthesis, and it was approved. I mean, this is literally AIDS by prescription. If you treat people with DNA chain terminators, that their cells will die. In cancer, well, that is the only way we could hope to make to make a dent into the cancer, which is the most aggressive type of killing cell, and it's not kidding. It's growing at a tremendous rate in your body. You have an active enemy there. And you can say, okay, now we have to use whatever it is, DNA chain terminators, even at the cost of collateral damage. But here we are shooting these same drugs now against the virus that isn't doing anything, that is already dormant and neutralized by antibody. That's completely irrational, but nobody dares to ask because A, it's good business, and B, it's politically correct.
Yeah. I saw was it on RT, the channel, a crosstalk where you were debating Denise Brown and Steve Ketterer. This is back in last year, 2010. But I wanted to give you a little bit of a more time there because you were cut off and you didn't get to finish your point. And I know that one of the arguments that I don't know, one of them were arguing was that you
mean that at the conference in Vienna?
Well, I don't know if that was where it was. There's just a program that's available online on YouTube currently, and you're in there with two debating basically. And one of the argumentation points that I heard from them was that the drugs have now become better basically. There's less.
I think that was in Vienna at an AIDS conference organized by Christian Fiala.
Okay, yeah.
He's a Viennese dissident.
and so what has happened there with the drugs, because now they say that they're more efficient, and they're saying that looking at data that is 10, 20 years old, but what would you say to that? Because there's still the active stuff of AZT in the drugs today, right?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. In science, there's nothing wrong with looking at data that's 10 years old.
Of course not. No.
Pythagoras was around 2,000 years old, and his science is still as good as it is today.
You got
and Galileo was 500 years around. It's still good stuff. If it is real science, it's not bad to look at it from 10 years back. If it's changing like AIDS every month, there's something fishy. Now, okay, so briefly here, what they do is they have reduced the dose of these chain terminators per person way down from what they used when they first introduced them in 87. In 87, it was over a gram a day, or I think sometimes even 2 grams a day. And now they are way down there in several milligram doses, whatever the doses is. So they adjusted it down. They wouldn't die that fast.
See, exactly. This is my point here, because if we take your point of arguing here that this is AIDS by prescription, and if they now then reduce the drugs that are the chain terminators, as you say, then that is going to kill less people quicker, correct? It kills those who take them at a slower pace, at a lower rate. Right, and so that could be one of the reasons why we see a decline in the amount of deaths as well.
That is exactly right.
Yeah, interesting.
There's another reason also. There are 2 reasons why they're doing better, as they say. In the early days, let's say like 8-10 years ago, they started treating AIDS patients only when they were already really sick. They didn't detect them early on. Now that they have to develop this antibody test, I keep repeating antibody test because it's a very, very big difference between antibodies and viruses. They're doing that, and they say, okay, you are at risk for AIDS because you are antibody positive, and better we treat you sooner. So they essentially treat healthy people with DNA chain terminators now, quite early. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So and it takes longer to kill a healthy guy with poison than one who is already in hospital with a pneumonia and immune deficiency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
Essentially, to poison a sick guy with the same dose is easier, or kill by poison, than somebody who has it all together still and is antibody positive. You need more time to get them, and particularly if you use a lower dose of the drug, you need even more time.
Well, I mean, this whole field is like the chemotherapy field in a way, that they are, basically poisoning the body so much at that stage that even the cancer cannot, survive, and the survival rate is extremely low in comparison, and it's kind of the same thing happening here. I don't even know what the survival rate is if you go on these kinds of drugs, Peter, like that has AZT in them.
Well, see, when they do use all the cancer chemotherapies are essentially like ACT. It's not very different. It's variations of the same theme.
Okay.
They all contain, or most of them contain, these DNA chain terminase. They stop DNA synthesis. It is a matter of time. I mean, in most cases, actually, it doesn't help at all because the cancers are often resistant to it, not the normal cells.
Yeah.
So it's not a very, but it's again something that every doctor says you must do, because a diagnosis of cancer is when it's treated accordingly, and not only surgery but with these chemicals, is about $30,000 for the doctor or for the medical profession. The monthly cost of chemotherapy is in the order of $1,000 minimum, and you get it 6 months and another 6 months and a year, and then you get surgery and then get some other radiation. So the average cancer patient from diagnosis to death generates about $30,000 for the medical establishment. I'm not saying that only sarcastically, but the doctors often mean well, but they don't look at the collateral damage. And see, most patients expect the doctors, they're so well trained in America and also in the rest of the Western world now.
Yeah.
For anything you have, there needs to be a prescription, because scientists know so well what to do. They give you a drug that cures your problem. Nothing, has no other side effects.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
that's exactly what most people believe.
Yeah,
because a few drugs are indeed almost that way. Like penicillin is close to an ideal drug. It has nearly zero side effects. If you have a strep throat or syphilis or what have you, some other infection, you take it for 3 days and it's gone. You know, that's your treat.
It's a miracle drug, yeah. But we're seeing the repercussions of that right now as well. You know, the super resistant bugs and all that. So
there are some, or you take steroids or you take cortisons for some rashes and fevers, and it works very well and it's quite harmless.
Yeah.
And it is that the reputation of these so-called wonder drugs, whatever they are, that is generalized by in most people's minds and in most doctors' codes. And they say, "Oh, I have something for you, specifically a new development," and they believe it, and he believes it, and they don't ask about the consequences and don't care, don't even have time to. And if they don't prescribe it, then the patient goes to the next doctor and says, of course we have something for breast cancer. Here it is, a new drug. You take it.
Exactly. We have a lot of money being poured into researching AIDS. There's, I think, a 10% increase or so each year. And what do you think that their dream is in this case? Is it to come up with a vaccine that they want to give to everybody to prevent this disease from ever coming back again?
They have tried that for 27 years.
Yeah.
And I count every year that they fail as a victory for me. If it were a virus, they would have long been able to make a vaccine. Vaccines were first invented and made by Edward Jenner, a British country doctor, in 1793. And he had the idea that the cowpox was close to human pox. Maybe we take some extracts from the cows who recover from it and put it on humans, and sure enough, it worked. And so he discovered the principle of vaccination. It's called vaccine because vacca is the Latin word for cow. So to make a vaccine, I'm not saying it's a picnic, but it's not all that complicated. Some of the last very effective vaccines that were made were the polio vaccines in the 50s. And now we are in 2010, 60 years later. Everything has more advanced. We know much more biology, molecular biology, and proteins and vaccines. And here we are having the most sophisticated, affluent scientific establishment that the planet has ever seen, working 27 years on a vaccine for HIV, and nothing came out of it.
Is that intentional, do you think, Peter? Is this done because they know?
No, it's not intentional.
Okay.
They believe it's just as intentional as other people follow orders. You know, they have only the virus on their mind. They are not allowed to, and they cannot even flex their minds anymore to think maybe it isn't. The first question you should ask if it doesn't work, if I had a graduate student working on a vaccine, And he said, I worked for 4 years on a vaccine, nothing came out of it. Say, are you sure it's the virus?
Yeah,
or
exactly.
it is a virus at all? That question is not allowed in America, if you or in most of the world. I bet also not in Sweden anymore.
Well, I mean, it's a perfect from the point of view of getting the research grants. It's a perfect disease because you're looking for something that's never going to be found, right? So it's just gonna keep going.
Yeah, I'm not even that sarcastic that they know that, but I mean they ask the same question and they never ask why can't I get anywhere with it?
Yeah.
And it's even worse than that in this case. Even worse. We already talked about it earlier. The only thing you ever find, not in AIDS patients or in people who are so-called risk for AIDS or positive, you don't find virus. You find antibody against the virus. And that's all they test for. All the tests go for the virus, almost all of them. There's some PCR we can talk about later. But guess why? You can't find the virus. Gallo couldn't find it, had to steal it. It was a big scandal. Robin Weiss, likewise in England, didn't find it, but took the Montaigne, the French sample, and said it was my own. Guess why? Because the natural antibody against this virus works so perfect that, like with all other antibodies, that nothing is left to find. You can't get it from the AIDS patient because it's all neutralized by antibody. It's like finding a polio virus in you or me. We have been vaccinated. Or I have at least been 30 or 40 years ago. You'd have a hell of a time to find polio in me, but antibodies you find.
Yeah.
You look for me in flu virus right now, fat chance. But antibodies, yes. Or if you look at herpes, or you look at anything, measles, mumps, yellow fever. Well, maybe yellow fever I never had, but any things I had in the past, you find antibodies, but you don't find the virus.
That's very interesting. I mean, and again, that defeats the whole purpose, because I mean, how can they? Because that implies that then we have the means to combat this virus already in us, meaning that we don't need to have anything. You know, we don't need to.
We have long neutralized the virus. That's why I keep saying it's a harmless virus.
Yeah.
Even if there were no antibodies, if it ever did something, it should do it as they said initially themselves, like in an exponentially growing shape in the populations called a bell-shaped curve. Like all the past epidemics, the flus and the choleras and the plagues, they go up over weeks exponentially and kill a lot of people, and then they decline again, they disappear because of immunity. There's not some such thing we have an infection now and 10 years later you get diarrhea. That's what they say about it.
Yeah.
And the virus, when there is a symptom, it's like this analogy with the Chinese army, me against the Chinese army. You have to have a matching number of microbes matching to the number of cells that you lose or cannot replace. Then you become sick. If you lose 1 in 1,000 cells from anything, from a molecule of uranium or strontium in your body, or a virus in 1,000 cells, big screwing deal, as they say.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Nothing will happen. The viruses have been living with us, and we with them, for billions or millions of years. You know?
Yeah, that's right.
They claim they are parasites, and they claim some space or some cells from us here and then, some energy, but not anywhere near enough under normal circumstances with a normal immune system that it would even bother you. Sometimes they get ahead of you when a new infection comes. You don't have immunity. They do sort of a blitzkrieg. You know what that means, a German word,
sure,
blitzkrieg.
Sure.
So they attack and first advance very fast because there's no immune system. But the body follows very soon and has learned to do that. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking here. We would not be here. We would have long died, or our ancestors long died sometime from viruses. And they with it. That has been going on for a long time, but not over 10 years. It's not like you have sex with somebody today, get a venereal disease, and you don't notice it until 10 years later when you all of a sudden are hurting. There's no precedent anywhere in biology for such a thing.
As we talked about, Peter, lifestyle choices will have consequences. Malnutrition will have consequences. It will have a tremendous amount of different types of symptoms, and hence we see a whole list of symptoms listed under the AIDS umbrella term, basically. But other than a lifestyle change, Have you looked into what would be a natural remedy? Can people revert these symptoms?
Well, see, the good thing about this, although it's always said it's so bad, you say that, you blame somebody. Well, that's the one and only thing that you can really change. You can't stop smoking or can't stop drinking. It may be hard, but it can be done.
Sure,
if you really would like to live. And let's say for most of the homosexuals I know, this is actually the case. They like sex like everybody else, I assume, and they like human relationships. They only use these drugs because that's their peer pressure among them. They have to impress their peers. Oh, I had even 10 more dates than you did. This kind of thing. It's their macho thing. In homosexual AIDS often. So they take these drugs often without even enjoying them, just to break records and impress their partners. But if they were encouraged, let's say globally or whatever is, or by the medical establishment, if you stop that, you can count on living 20 years longer and having many more dates that way, rather than burning out and getting AIDS and getting sick and getting all these problems that we have now. It's a totally preventable disease. The president could, with a stroke of the pen, prohibit or ban all antiviral drugs, and the recreational drugs users could be informed and would adjust accordingly. Of course, when you talk about intravenous drug users, I mean, really addicted ones, I don't know enough about it, but I think that's a habit that's very difficult to break, no matter what you say. But even that would make a difference in the young kids who used to be, until at least not long ago, scared by AIDS. If you told them that would have caused AIDS, they would have been scared. I think now they don't even take that serious anymore.
Exactly. At least a generation or two right there for a while, were definitely have a different relationship to sex. It's associated with something you should fear, right? So it's a psychological impact here as well, correct?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So
and they missed that chance, these guys. I mean, at least the drug control authorities, whoever they are, they missed that chance. They could have, when they were still scared, the kids, they could have told them, if you do this, this is what's going to happen. But now I don't think they even pay attention anymore. Yeah. Most of the kids I know, they even don't know it anymore.
From the medical establishment, then, there must be an unwillingness to recognize these things that we've been talking about. And is that, do you think, the reason why you've been censored so much, Peter?
That is probably the bottom line. That's why it is. You see, for them it would be to admit this now and say now we have ignored or overlooked or failed to ask some of the most basic questions in science. It would be a big embarrassment, to say the least. And many of them, I mean, the last thing that most doctors want to do, they don't want to kill their patients. They want to do no harm, and not supposed to do. And here they have been doing it in large proportions. And they continue to do it. I mean, I think they really do kill their American patients or European patients with these antiviral drugs.
Yeah. And they try to counter the argument to you that they say, I've heard that you are dangerous because of the fact that you might have influence on somebody, so that they won't take the drug. But what you're saying is that they would survive. Yeah,
you're right. They call me a mass murderer, and unfortunately, I must say, they are the ones who have at least the means to do it, and they are doing it. In my opinion, they're doing it.
I mean, look at the perspective, of big pharma, and they have more deaths on their hands than any other industry, I think, in that sense. I mean, for Christ's sake, there's so many deaths by properly prescribed, drugs each year. I don't have the number in front of me. We went through with David, but it's amazing, the number, Yeah,
in the U.S. alone, I think it's supposedly around 100,000 people.
I think so, too. Yeah, it's amazing. So, I mean, who has blood on their hands here, Come on.
But I mean, I don't even blame them for mistakes and for misdoses and errors and things like that. But here we are talking about a very fundamental problem that they should have been able to understand and should by now know, and should at least somehow try to find a way out of it. I mean, to prescribe somebody who has antibody against the virus, no symptoms, DNA chain terminators, I mean, sooner or later, this guy is going to be dead or sick.
Yeah.
It cannot be different. And even if the virus is deadly, this is inevitable that when they could make. See, another thing that has been thrown out in the wake of this AIDS research mostly, in the old days, not so old days, like 20, 30 years ago, whenever a drug came up, there was enough information. It had been tested in animals and in cats and in guinea pigs and in monkeys or whatever it is even. Yeah. And have you ever heard about this? Nobody ever reports. Nobody. The consequences of taking these drugs for the same time under the same conditions as they are prescribed to AIDS patients in animals.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost never seen. You never find it in Nature or in Science or in the England Journal of Medicine or in the JAMA, and they don't ask for it. I mean, it's unbelievable. They are not unsophisticated, most of the gay guys. They ask for everything. We want free drugs, we want free health care, we want roller skates, and we want jogging, and we want free theater tickets and all free care. And they never ask, okay, could you please, and we want the free drugs. What are these drugs doing to cats and mice and dogs?
Right.
Or goldfish?
Good question. Good question. Yeah.
It's not asked.
Yeah.
They are so well trained that animals are different and we cannot predict what happens to humans and animals. It's not true. I mean, the basic metabolism, DNA synthesis, is the same.
It's identical almost, yeah.
In E. coli as it is in Homo sapiens, or in rattlesnakes and in grasshoppers.
Right.
Sure, there's some difference in uptake and in resistance and all these, but this is minor. The basic thing, if you feed your dog AZT every day, you can see him die. I guarantee you will see him die. There's no life without DNA.
Yeah, look at those studies, and I know that you referred to some other ones, other papers that have been published though in the Lancet and the New England Journal of Medicine, but that's not these studies. That are other studies, correct?
Yeah, they have done controls in humans, not too many, very few. Real controls. They keep doing it, but they only control one drug against another, and always say the latest one is better than the previous one. But the controls against untreated, that's the real control. The untreated person against the treated person. Those have been done only very few times. And in both cases that I know of the major trials with very negative consequences. Mortality went up, and the patients became dependent on blood transfusion. They get anemic, and if you don't have red cells, you suffocate, you die. Essentially, you cannot pick up oxygen anymore. Okay, did you mention the book? It might be not. It is Inventing the AIDS Virus. Have you mentioned it?
Let's talk about it right now.
It would be a very good book for anybody who is close to the problem. Also for scientists, but it is written for the lay people, and it is written exactly for people who are said to have AIDS or HIV and are under pressure or to take antiviral drugs or feel negative consequences. For those, it would be very, very curative. In fact, it would be an immunization against the HIV/AIDS hypothesis for them. That's why I recommend the book, and it's not too expensive. They can get it for, I think it's like $10 from Amazon.com, or can get it from me. That is somebody selling some for me to support the lab a bit with an inscription of myself to the person who wants it.
Okay, excellent. And people can buy it through your website, Duesberg.com, correct?
That is correct, yeah. They would get it within a few days with a personal subscription.
Excellent. We will obviously link this up as well, Peter, on our website, so people can click through easy.
Have you seen it? Have you looked at it?
I actually have not. I've seen documentaries, obviously, where you were featured, and we've tried to get a hold of you previous as well, so it's been great, having you on and finally doing this program with you. Very, very exciting to hear your point of view and finally just give you some time to lay out your story and your version of this,
It explains those things that we covered quite well, like the germ theory, what viruses are typically doing and how they react and how the immune system knocks them down, and what is happening and what drugs are used and what AZT actually is like and why it was chosen and what the consequences must be and are for it. So all of this is in the book with examples and with stories, and also a lot of details about the personalities involved. my friend Bob Gallo and Peter Duesberg, and what's happening to them personally that we cover too. One of them gets, one half gets the millions and can publish and meet everywhere and gets the medals, and the other half gets nothing, just for different opinion, not for being proven wrong.
And as well, Peter, we want to just give our listeners here the website for the upcoming conference that you are going to participate in Washington, D.C. This is December 1st to the 3rd this year, 2011 here. The website for that is RA for Rethinking AIDS, ra2011.org, and we will have this link up as well. Quickly, Peter, what will you be addressing at the conference so people know?
Well, much what we covered here, what we had talked about now.
Yep.
In fact, I think I want to be exactly very basic, if I can, about the germ theory. How little it. It was predicted to be a new epidemic, a new infectious epidemic, the AIDS, and how it fails to meet any one of these conditions. It isn't spreading. It isn't active. It isn't subject to immunity. We can't find a vaccine, and it. Most of all, and most trivially or bluntly of all, it's not contagious. 1 million American doctors have not been able to get not one of them AIDS from a patient. Well, 1,000 American doctors who are so smart and so sophisticated, so well equipped, pick up hepatitis from their patients every year.
Yeah.
About 1,000. No, that's not unheard of, because they see millions of patients. Well, sooner or later you scratch or stick a needle, and the doctor has the relation with a doctor, triple doctor, or many doctors and patients is much more intimate than sex. They go in there with needles and pull out blood, or stick in blood, or cut them, or surgerize them, or reaching down and reaching up. This is much more than just conventional sex, and yet nobody gets it. And the same in Africa. Have you ever heard of a doctor in Africa getting AIDS? It's only the guys from the jungles or wherever they are, from the villages, who get it. The tourists don't get it. Nowhere.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, and obviously then some of this you will run through here at the conference as well, Rethinking AIDS in this year. And as well, I want to mention the title of your book again, Inventing the AIDS Virus. Either you can get it through Amazon.com or Peter's website, which is Duesberg.com, and we will have the links up there on our website as well. Thank you so much again, Professor, for coming on the program and sharing your story with us. We really appreciate it. So thank you again for your time. It's been great having you with us.
Okay, I'm looking forward for the next time. Thanks, Henrik.
That's our program for today. Thank you for listening. Upcoming, we have Robert Newman on the Shakespeare Project. Then following, we have Rick Osman, Colin Andrews, Philip Coppens, Carl Munk, Franco Collins, Tony Bushby, Peter Dale Scott, David Talbot, and many more. Thanks to all our members. We'll be back soon with more.